Okay, so we got up towards the end of Parak Chiloi, which is the parak about making an appeal. And we really were dealing with some of the fundamentals in terms of what tefillah is really about, Shemona Esrei is really about. We're nearing the end of this chapter. We're on page 238 in the English and page Kuf Chav Zayin in the Hebrew. And hopefully we'll finish off this chapter today and move on to Amidah for next week. I am prayer. It's a very interesting expression. I am tefillah. Eis Ratzon, a time of need, a time of favor. Shelo kol ha'itim shavos l'tefillah. Not all times are equal in terms of the efficacy of prayer. Sheyesh zmanim shehem biyuchad eis ratzon. There are times we call eis ratzon, a time of desire, and then there are times that are the Omer Dirsho Shemitzel Karov Yosakaro. Darshan Hashem, look for Hashem when he's found, when he's close. Mizmane Haratzon, hu b'siyum hashlamas mitzvah. Those are times in which the gates of heaven are open for mitzvah. And God is close to be makabel, to receive the tfilas mispalo in the moment, in the wondrous moment. In other words, there are special times when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is fit for receiving the tefillah. Uchemevur b'Torah mitzvos, as is explained in Torah and mitzvos, vidoy meiser, which is the mitzvah of confession over the when we bring the first fruit, when we bring the bikurim, we do a confessional vidoy meiser. Shekasher mesaimim, as mitzvahs trumas and maisros. We ask Hashem to bless the earth that He put us on. So the reason why we have this verbal confession when you're offering your trumos and maisos and bikurim is because there's a notion of opening your mouth with praises when you're doing a mitzvah, as if your whole body is consumed with mitzvos as you pray.
Rabbi, you keep freezing.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the best I could do is we have a poor internet connection. Let me see if I can. 1 second. I'm wondering if I can try to. Let me pause for a second. Okay.
You're frozen now.
I'm frozen?
Yeah, you were just frozen that whole time.
All right. Is it frozen now?
I can see you now, but you were just frozen.
Okay, yeah, we were changing something up. That's fine. Okay. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Lazar Yohiv Pruta La'ani. He would give a coin to a poor person, and then he would pray. I will see your face only through kindness. Almost as if our right to daven to Hashem is predicated on our need to first beseech HaKadosh Baruch Hu's brios, in other words, to reach out to others and give tzedakah, give charity. If you want to open up the gates of prayer, the first thing you have to do is give a little bit of tzedakah. And even though tzedakah is a unique mitzvah,
Rabbi Gelman,
yeah.
Can you mention what page you are in English, so when you freeze, at least I can follow from the book?
Yep.
You still keep freezing, Rabbi.
Okay.
We're at 239 though.
Yeah. Oh, hold on a second. Let me.
Thank you.
Okay. You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to see if this is any better. Hopefully it shouldn't freeze, all right? It looks like I'm frozen. It looks like one of mine is frozen, right?
The computer one was frozen, but we could still hear you from the phone.
Okay. So v'chein amru v'gemara. He said in the Gemara that Rabbi Elazar used to give tzedakah prior to his. Let me see that here. He would give tzedakah prior to his davening, and that there was a special emphasis placed on the idea of davening coming from a place of tzedakah. Kol mitzvah mitzvah habe'ez ratzon l'tfilah b'miuchad al inyan shayach la'osa mitzvah. L'chein no goes hamnashim mispalel albanim talmidei chachamim e'olachas ner Shabbos. And we like to come from one mitzvah to another. That therefore, right, when you go from one mitzvah, that's a specifically special time to daven. That's why we daven for our children. We light candles because we're in the middle of davening. We're in the middle of doing a mitzvah, lighting halakas neiros, and at that moment, we go out of our way specifically to daven for our kids. Just as when we give tzedakah, that's the best time to daven for ourselves. That's why we give tzedakah in the morning before we daven. That's why Rabbi Akiva says you should do that. And every morning, before you go into shul, the first thing you should do is put some money into the pushka. Then kol pam she's davening la'od ma'asiyos mitzvah b'chol makom b'chol zman ma me'od kidai lach tov rega nifla zeh lispal al kol panim tefillah kitzara. So whenever you have the opportunity to do a mitzvah, you should take a few seconds to daven. Right. So whatever the mitzvah is that comes to your hands, take a moment out and speak to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, b'chol drachim, all the ways elu. Came bichlal inyan chilui. All of this is called chilui. Chilui is lehisratzos lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ayidei asiyas mitzvos. Is to make yourself desirable for Hashem through the performance of mitzvos, whether it's tzedakah, the power of the tzibur, the channeling the koach ha'avot, the power of our forefathers, sugyot elam mukamot. These are quite deep, profound areas. To know, how do we get on God's good side? How do we trigger? How do we tap into Ratzon Hashem? Everything that the rabbis revealed to us. So it's somebody's barach. How is it kli atzum benora litoach sharei shamayim chomshus? It is a wondrous vessel to open up the gates of heaven. So to take one mitzvah and then transmute that into a prayer, to take the power of a congregation and to build off of that, as we were talking about in the past few weeks, to channel the energy from our forefathers and the mitzvahs that they did and the sacrifices they made, and to ride those coattails. Remember, we spoke about the story of hovering above the pit and the idea that we're riding the coattails of people who came before us and people who are around us, and how the person davening in the next row is crying, how that doesn't just inspire us, but it actually transforms the tefillah of the whole tzibur. And we are carried. And finally, we're carried by mitzvos. So there are many different things that open up those gateways, and we have to make use of all of those. Hirashnu chilui milashon taina. Tefillah comes from a claim. Right? What is a taina? And we're on page 240 now, I believe, right? We explain that chilui is about making arguments in appeasement before Hashem. Piyus is like an appeasement. There's another meaning of the word chilui. It could mean to tremble and to shake before God. Right? So it's not just shuckling. What's the origin of shuckling, by the way? Where does shuckling come from? Anybody know? So I think it's Yehuda Halevi, the author of the Kuzari, writes that it comes from the fact that we used to have fewer books because it was before the printing press. And if three people had to share one book, they had to bend in taking turns, looking close, and the other guy would go in and also bend in. So it was like three dipping birds together, and they go in sync. It's like synchronized prayer. And that's where chocolate came from. Anyway, so we explained that Chilul Milashon, the others explain that it has to do with the trees, that we daven and we wave like the trees in the wind, and we're affected by circumstances, but we're here to sing to God nonetheless. So trembling. Ein brachos, mamabeis, yedarsh chazal bekama ofanim lashon of vayichal, Betfilas Moshe. What is vayichal that we have in the prayer of Moshe Rabbeinu? So Moshe beseeches Hashem after the sin of the golden calf, and he calls out to God. And one of them is that we're actually trembling internally. What is achilu? Trembling is fire in your bones. Sounds poetic. It's fire in my bones, right? Sounds like you're in love or you're angry or whatever it is, right? Some passion is running through your veins. But that's exactly what one is supposed to experience before God. As if my bones are on fire with the fire of holiness. As we say in the Pasuk, he doesn't quote that here, but that's the verse we say. All of my bones scream out to you, God. Who is like you? All prayer has to be from a place of trembling. My grandmother used to say, remember, beauty is skin deep, but ugliness is to the bone. All tefillah has to be from a place of trembling. And some say, many say, this is the reason why we shook. Because what are we doing? Internally we're shaking, and outside we're shaking. Right? We're feeling it. We're experiencing this wave of passion or fear or awe, or whatever it is, right? Yesh v'zetarte, and there's two aspects. One, fear. I have the most important interview of my life is coming today, and I have to get up there. I have to daven. I have to pour out my heart. I have a big day today, right? I have a job interview. I have a case in court. I'm terrified. So what do? I'm going to talk to God now. And that fear that you are thinking about for your day or for whatever's going on for you, a medical test that you have to take, something more frightening than maybe a swab in the nose. And you pour your heart out to God in that moment. And in that moment, there's inner trembling, and that expression on the outside is the trembling as well. The day that Hashem was revealed, in the Yitzis Mitzrayim, we say that in Hallel. The mountains danced like Elim, right? The mountains danced, and the Vaot, like rams, and the valleys shook like a sheep. They walked or they moved around like sheep. It's a very strange imagery. That imagery, though, is to describe the type of awe that we had, the bending and the enthusiasm we had by Mount Har Sinai and by Yitzis Mitzrayim. Top of page 241. It says by Torah Tani Gleisa Ve'anan. You were revealed on your cloud in your glory, al am kedoshecha ladaber imam, on your holy mountain to speak with them. Gam kol ha'olam kulo chel mipanecha, whole world is shaking from before you. Sorry, my speaker system. Okay, I just wanted to make a meta joke about how my voice echoes. We're all shaking before you, God. Gracious, Ech ish shora shchina ba'olam oches es kulam pachad v'chalchala. That just as the Shekhinah is in the world, and it captures everything, it fills every corner of the universe, even in our hearts and our bones. Came mamash kasher omed adam tefillah yesh kan hashrosh shchina. We're staying tefillah. There is a revelation, like Har Sinai, like Yitzis Mitzrayim. V'udim Shulchan Aruch b'kama halachos kigon ha'isra avor l'fnei mispalo. Nezher shchina kenegu. You're not allowed to walk right in front of someone davening. Why not? Because the Shekhinah is with that person. So you're going to cut out, walk right in front of the king of the universe. Excuse me, you just got to cut through. Sorry, right? When the divine presence is resonating, we should be seized with fear. Like the trees of the forest that wave. Amru Chazal Rabbi Akiva. We keep it in Spal Beiso Adam Menicho Bezav Zu Most Bezav Zacheres Menechachrias Vishtachavayos. We're told that Rabbi Akiva that Rabbi Akiva's time, when he would pray in his house, the person would leave him in one corner and they would find him in another corner because he would be bowing and bending, and it's almost as if he would sort of wander to the other side. And they would look and say, how did he get there, right? Now, it's not to say that a person should be perambulating around the shul the entire time during davening. That's a little distracting when people do that. But it is to say that their movement is physical and emotional as well. There is movement that's part of prayer. And it should allow it to take hold of you if you really experience the Shekhinah. The second reason why we travel, when a person contemplates the importance of the issue that you're praying for. Bottom of 241. Along these lines, the Torah says that Moshe Rabbeinu prayed and was seized by the fire in his bones. Moshe Rabbeinu is palo al achsosa chilu. Hainu she's palo al kaparat chet ha'egel. When he died for the sin of the golden calf. Hech le'atzmo mamish motzenos pashus habakasha. He became sick over the fact that had he failed in his request, the Jewish people would have been wiped out. Shekol tachlis brios ha'olam talui b'zeh. The health of the world was dependent upon Moshe's success, or God forbid his failure. So, number one, we tremble because we are in the presence of the Shekhinah, and there should be fear that takes over us. Number two, what it is we have to ask for, the particular agenda that our tefillah is touching upon. And that's what we said, the job interview, the medical examination that's coming up, right? The big meeting, whatever it is. Anam yesh kan odin. And that was a third area, a third arena, which we need to explore. Just as when you're learning is dependent upon how much toil you put into it. The soul of a Jew is connected with the Torah in a true marriage, right? We're completely attached to the Torah. That's why you ever wonder, you learn something in a Torah class, and then later that day you hear an idea that reminds you of what you just learned. It's not because the Torah is repetitive and that everything's the same. It's because your whole life, your breath, your daily activity, it is one Torah. And the Torah is presented to you that day, the Daf Yomi, the Mishnah, right? The halacha you learned, the shir you listened to on YouTube, all that stuff was brought to you, sponsored by God for that moment, just for you. It's your little nevuah. You had to hear it for a reason. So if you believe that that's a revelation of Shekhinah in your life, that you're connected, you're intertwined with the Torah that's part of your life, then of course every piece of Torah you hear that day is going to connect. There's no question. I'm not surprised when it happens. It happens all the time to me. So that's, you'll look out for that. You'll see a little reminder of what we're learning today. You're going to see it in your life later today. It's going to pop up. So Amnam Yesh Kan Odinyan, which is that the neshama of the Jew is connected to Torah. And then that's what the rabbi said, that when each neshama of a Jew is another letter in the Torah, it doesn't mean there are only 600,000 Jews or 600,000 letters. It's not what it really meant. It just means that the Torah is incomplete without each of us. Our soul, our soul imprint, our fingerprint is part of the Torah, and the Torah is part of us. And if one of us weren't there, it would be incomplete. When one person dies, God forbid, chashuva, he can save Torah in Nisra. That's why the rabbi said that when a Jew dies, it's like Torah is burnt. Rakaguf kotetz, and the body is what stops the soul from connecting to its source. So imagine you have inside of you, right? Imagine there's this jug that has inside of it this very valuable a liquid, whatever it is. It's priceless. It's a fuel that could fuel millions of cars for generations, right? They never have to, it's just a little drop of liquid. That's the neshama. It's a holy spark inside of you. And the jug is worthless, right? Obviously, you don't want to drop it, but the jug is worthless. It's just a body that kind of holds it because it needs to be held. Otherwise, it falls on the floor. It's liquid. It needs a container. So the neshama in this world needs a container. But you're holding this holy fire, you're holding this Torah inside of you. And the only thing that acts as a chatzitza, as an interpolation, blocking the access of that kedusha, is the body. So that's why we get dragged into bodily urges. Ultimately, the Torah is obfuscated. It's covered up. You can't find it anymore. So you're looking at a glass and has water in it, but it's covered with so much schmutz because they haven't cleaned it in 30 years in this diner, a cheap diner where you're sitting. And that's why it's not visible. You think the water's dirty. But in reality, it's you, right? Really, it's the kli on the outside. And so we have to tap into that. The dveikus b'kedusha, the inner soul. So nimsa she'ikarat, and that's why you see reminders. Your soul gets a little reminder or something. You see a sign, you hear a Torah, you hear a word, you have a conversation, and it reminds you, I heard that earlier today. I heard that this week. I just was listening to this. And all of a sudden, you feel like alive, like the purpose in your life. Everything's coming together again. Nimsa she'ikarat tzlacha b'Torah tluya ad kama. We find that success in Torah is dependent. Ad kama yizke l'sayg mechitzas haguf. How much can you remove away the barrier of the body? A person who is winnowing or seeding in a field, and the earth is hard, the hard, difficult earth to stick the shovel in, and you can't plow. You have to plow first the ground, chop it up, so that the seeds will be able to fall on the ground. Otherwise, they're going to sit on the top surface and nothing's going to happen. So first, you have to penetrate that hard ground. And then afterwards, the fruit will grow. So, Kenu Torah, Hakidosha, holy Torah is the same way. In order for Torah to penetrate your heart, you have to plow through the hardness of the body in order to enable the produce to grow. This is what tefillah is all about. When you're standing in davening, you want to connect the outside holiness of God to the inside holiness, inside, beneath the surface of the hard earth. That's buried inside your vessel, buried inside your body is this Torah. Well, what do you do? So first, the stubbornness of the body, the exhaustion of the body, right? The urges of the body, all that stuff. Take what's inside of it, the contents, away from its source. It's desperate to connect to the source of its energy, of its life. The soul wants to connect to where it came from. It's like crying to pull out of you, right? You imagine like water molecules. Water molecules, they attract each other. So you put 2 drops of water right next to each other on a surface. They'll little by little they'll touch, and then they'll become 1 drop of water. So the soul is looking to do that. The mayim elyonim, mayim tachtonim, the upper waters and the lower waters. So what do? We want kedusha. We go to the mikveh, because the mikveh is the upper waters that fell down below. And on that second day of creation, when God separated between the upper water and the lower water, created a period in the olam, separation in the world. That was terrible separation. And now we want to bring it back together. So Kedusha is the process of bringing the upper waters and lower waters back together again. It's the only preserved upper waters that are down here on earth. Anything else that's below on the surface was already drawn, was already in the category of lower waters. So we want to connect to Mayim Elyonim. We want to connect that water again. So no matter what happened to us, a lack of Kedusha, a lack of holiness, has to be brought back to Kedusha through bringing water back together again. And this, and through Misrachet Kol Shebro, by putting in the effort of the body, we could actually soften the surface of the earth and allow those seeds to penetrate and allow the inner koach, the nutrients of the earth, to rise up and grow into a plant. So how do we soften up the body, right? How do we, so there was in the Middle Ages, there were people who believed in, like some of the Christian groups as well, that flogged themselves in order to punish their body, right? In order that they were softened up for tefillah. So we don't do this anymore, and educators who practice this end up in jail. But we do believe that the body is an obstacle to Kedusha, right? So that's the idea that we're establishing. So we have to move the body. We have to shuckle, right? The movement is the softening of the surface that is preventing the inner from accessing the outer. And that's the concept, the Kabbalistic concept here of movement of kol atzmosei tomar Hashem yikamocha. My bones are calling out, but I have this layer of skin and fat that's sitting above it. It's not letting it happen. And I crave closeness to God. And you crave closeness to God. You want it. You may not realize you want it, but it's the only time you'll ever be happy when you're close to Hashem. And you're yearning for it. And these two aspects, the movements that we've discussed in Tefillah, top page 243, which are bowing and swaying. Bowing is the nullification of oneself by lowering yourself down, tachanun, by bowing, right? All those things that I do. I'm lowering myself before the Almighty. I'm humbling myself. Remember we said that the aspects of chiloi, right? Is the aspect of lowering yourself, of recognizing you're in the makom of the Shekhinah in front of God. And the other aspect, we said, is recognizing that there's an inner shaking for God. It's a different aspect, right? Because I'm trembling over whatever is going on in my life, or the reality that I'm presented before God itself is so frightening and so awesome. In the real sense, awesome in the original intent of the word. And so we bow because we humble ourselves, because we realize we're in the presence of the Shekhinah, and we shake because we're frightened, because we're inspired, because we want to crack the surface of the guf and get to the heart. And every person sways in the course of their avodah, whatever they're doing. Me'ot v'alfei pamim, hundreds of thousands of times. Maintain leiv, and if you placed your heart, k'tzas machshava, and a little bit of thought, yuchol liknos havana utechusha v'nefesh mashmos hanorah shel, you'll be able to understand the significance, the height of such movement. At that moment, k'tzas machshava yuchol liknot havana utechusha v'nefesh mashmos hanorah shel chol tfilosav yiyu b'chetza acher ashrei kona hergish b'zeh. And then your tefillos will be transcendent. They'll be on another level altogether. Fortunate is the person who acquires such a feeling for this. Before we move on to the next chapter, we'll introduce today and go into next week. Really, we have left Amida, we have Itur, and that's it. So that's very exciting. But I want to just review what we said in today's piece. Today we talked about the idea of Chiloi as a language of not just reaching out to God as an appeal, making an appeal to God, but also the idea of to tremble before God. Trembling before God is an expression of fear. It's an expression of awe. And it's also an expression of inner yearning to come back to our real self. If anyone's familiar with the comics, so Spider-Man has a nemesis. He's got like this venom, right? Which is an alien. It's an alien liquid form that kind of attaches itself, a symbiote, attaches itself to the creature, and it takes over. So I always think the neshama is kind of like this inner symbiote. It's the soul in us, right? And when it's done with its purpose, the body leaves, the body decays, it's nothing, and then the soul ascends to a higher level, right? So that's this inner, we have this inner force, this life force, this energy, which is everything we are. It's our personality, it's governing our drives, it's making it click for us, and it's what ultimately is covered up when we feel sad, when we feel disconnected, and we feel like a failure. All of that is because the body is developing such a thick layer, encrusted layer outside of the soul that you can't get there anymore. And so we have to break it down, right? Means, obviously, you have to have a healthy body. That's number one. You have to work to be healthy. That's important, because if you're not, then your body's illness and your body's laziness will take away from the emphasis of the soul. People who obsess over their body too much, whether in an unhealthy way or bodybuilders, they kind of build up these ridiculous. That's also creating a layer outside the soul. You can't do that. You have to be healthy, so you're not sick and not obsessive. You have to be, you live a long life. And then beyond the physical health, right? The obsession with things that the body craves naturally because of the animalistic side of us, right? All those desires, those things are there for a reason, because we're human and we need them. But we also, the obsession with those things take us away from the soul. So in the Christian world, they've decided that everything that's physical is awful. And that's a tragic mistake. They deny the physical identity of the human body, and they end up in a lot of trouble. We don't do that, God forbid. We say a little bit of the body is, a little bit of the nefesh bahamis is holy. We call that kiddusha. That's why when you get married, specifically with one person, and what is that called? That's called kiddushin. That's holy. Not the world. The rest of the world is now unholy, right? But kiddushin, when you find purpose in the physical world, that's a mitzvah that elevates, and that's why when we take a mitzvah, we're supposed to daven at that moment, because what we're doing is we're elevating the physical world. We're finally putting the seed in the ground and allowing it to grow. It's working. And when we use that in a way that's negative, right? So all of a sudden what happens is the soul, it's so thirsty to be connected to its source. The Mayim Elyonim and the Mayim Tachtonim, the upper water and the lower water, are completely separate from one another, and we feel either distant, sad, angry, depressed, all those things that cause us to feel further and further away from the Kodesh Baruch. So that's the hergish, that's the emotional state of tefillah and what it's all about. We'll begin. For any questions, otherwise we'll begin Amida for today.
I do have a question.
Hold on, I
okay.
gotta put volume on. I don't hear it. All right, go ahead.
Before you, so when you were saying today about how one of the reasons why we are shuckling and shaking is because of even just the fear of what we're bringing to Hashem. But last week, I think it was, you were saying how that one rabbi, you can't be too happy and you can't be too sad. It's all, he's just straight in his emotions. So that kind of like negates what we're saying here, though.
Okay. The question was, we spoke about last week, equanimity in Avodas Hashem, and overjoy, or just profound sadness, is simply not, is almost the opposite of Iman. That idea was a separate idea about Emunah b'Hashem. When a person has faith, yes, you experience those emotions. You go to a wedding, you're happy. You go to a funeral, you're sad. That's all correct. But ultimately, those things don't take away from you as an Eved Hashem. Meaning, God asked you to make a blessing for good events. You find $1 million in the street, right? That's deserving of a bracha. I don't know. Some people find $20 in their field, but it's deserving of a bracha. A comedian recently, I heard a comedian point out that he found $20 in his pocket, and it's the equivalent if Bill Gates were to find, I think, something like $270 million for him. That would be the equivalent. So yeah, we're happy when good things happen, and we're sad when bad things happen, but we make a bracha by bracha. What does that mean? That means that throughout it all, God is part of our life. That's what I'm going through. I think today what we're talking about is breaking through the human created drama, the physical created drama, to find the same Hashem that we spoke about. If there's a pandemic, I see God. If everyone's doing great, I see Hashem. The Beis HaMikdash falls, I'm looking for God. We're on Yom Kippur, I find Hashem. Right? Son's bar mitzvah, greatest day in the world. And then, Lo Aleinu, a Rebbe passes away and somehow see God, right? It's Tziduk Hadin. So that's the point from last week. We said that Rabbi Gamliel was on such a level in that mentality that even when he was getting married, he was able to say the Shema. He was the exception. And even though most human beings live in a mindset where it's impossible to say the Shema the first night of the wedding, he was different. And his son actually says in the next Mishnah, don't think you're my father. Not everyone's as holy as my father. And then Rabbi Gamliel also, when his wife passed away, he took a shower. He took a hot shower. So the Mishnah question, how could you do so? Rabbi Gamliel was different. Rabbi Gamliel was on a different plane. He was so connected to God, that idea that you bless God for the good and bad, that even the normal halachic requirements that affect you from good to bad times didn't affect him. He was so living in that plane with God. So that's an extreme example. I hope that answers the question. Okay.
Rabbi
The next
Gelman?
section is called Amidah. Amidah means standing, literally. And Amidah is what we say when we daven. We daven Amidah. We call it Shemona Esrei because usually the davening for the week has 18 blessings. Actually, it has 19. It was one bracha added on by Shmuel HaKatan against the heretics from Malshinim. But Amidah is what's used to refer to the Shemona Esrei. When we say on Shabbos 7 blessings, it's called the Amidah, right? When we have 9 blessings, it's called the Amidah. When we have 18 or 19, we say it's called the Amidah. So where we find the lashon of Amidah is one of the expressions that connotes prayer. Vayamod Pinchas Vayipalel. So tefillah we know, Vayipalel means tefillah, but what's Vayamod? And he stood and he prayed. Pinchas took a stand. What was Pinchas' stand? Pinchas saw the Jewish people were dying from a plague that was triggered by immorality. And he took a stand. And he made plilot. He pleaded with Hashem. And he insisted that Hashem stop the plague. Amida b'tfilu matzav bo mora adam mitzpalo shekol atzmo mitzvah b'telem hema k'parol shas. It means that everything that I have is completely nullified the time of my prayer. Everything else in the world doesn't matter when I'm davening. The world can swirl around this room, around this shul, and doesn't make a difference. Hefech ma'amida yeshiva. Sitting is the opposite. Matzav haba k'totzah mizeh shemargish katos mosad k'vei. Oh, I'm so tired, I have to sit. Okay, and Yoshit. Sitting is what you do when you are overwhelmed with your reality, your physical or external reality. Ma'amida yehora bitul atzmo. Standing is nullifying yourself. Although the truth is that when someone wants to meet with me in my office and I can't meet for that long, I often make it a standing meeting. It's a cosmetic trick. But don't tell this to anyone who might have experienced a standing meeting with me. You could just explain to them that when I'm standing, it's because I don't want to be kafui to my physical exhaustion and urges, and I just simply want to stand and embrace the gravity of the moment in the conversation. But in reality, it's because I want the nunnik to leave the office. Okay. So,
Rabbi Gelman?
and all of the strengths of the soul Omdim muchanim l'chvodo. Everything stands up before God. Techef im ha'amida, as I stand, she is bakos nofels machitza gedol shvino levein baro. At that moment, the barrier between us and God collapses. Shu ha'gof, in tavosav, v'ritzon sav, all my desires, all my needs. As a meila ba'ad vekut atzumad vako, you had it close my tefillah. Then, what happens is there's a tremendous connection that is forged in that moment with me and God. And with this, we'll stop. I'll go with Amida next time. And again, this is exciting because we are nearing the end of our Sefer. And really kol kavod to everyone who's been learning along. I think we have like 46 or almost close to 50 episodes so far in this incredible series. We're going to have a big 100th anniversary when we have the 100th episode.
Karen has
have
a question. She's trying to.
a wonderful